Chapter 19 of the Centaur by Algernon Blackwood. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Read by Yoganand. The Centaur. Chapter 19. Privacy is ignorance. Josiah Royce. Somewhat after the manner of things suffered in vivid dreams, where surprise is numbed and wonder becomes the perfect password, the Irishman remembers the sequence of little events that filled the following day. Yet his excitement held nothing of the vicious fling of fever. It was spread over the entire being rather than located hotly in the brain and blood alone, and it derived, as it were, from tracts of his personality usually unstirred, atrophied indeed in most men, that connected him as by a delicate network of feelers with nature and the earth. He came gradually to feel them as a man in certain abnormal conditions becomes conscious of the bodily processes that customarily go on in himself without definite recognition. Stoll could have told him, had he cared to seek the information, that his fringe of wider consciousness, stretching to the stars and winds and earth, was the very part that had caused his long unrest and yearning, the part that knew the earth as mother and sought the sweet and savage freedom of what he called, with the poverty of modern terms, primitive. The channels leading toward a state of cosmic consciousness, one with the earth life, were being now flushed and sluiced by the forces emanating from the persons of his new companions. And as this new state slowly usurped command, the readjustment of his spiritual economy thus involved caused other portions of himself to sink into temporary abeyance. While it alarmed him, it was too delicious to resist. He made no real attempt to resist. Yet he knew full well that the portion sinking thus out of sight was what folk with such high pride call reason, judgment, common sense. In common with animal, bird, and insect life, all intimately close to nature, he began to feel as realities those subtle currents of the earth's personality by which the seals know direction in the depths of 1,000-mile sea, by which the homing pigeons blaze trails through space, birds fly south, the wild beasts know their pathways, and all simple life, from the red Indian to the red ant, acknowledges the viewless guidance of the mother's enveloping heart. The cosmic life ran through his being, lighting signals, offering service, more claiming leadership. With it, however, came no loss of individuality, but rather a powerful increase of life by means of which, for the first time, he dreamed of a fuller existence which would eventually harmonize and combine the ancient simplicity of soul that claimed the earth with modern complexity which indulged alone rendered the world so ugly and insignificant. He experienced an immense driving push upon what Bergson has called the elan vital of his being. The opening charge of his new discovery, however, was more than disconcerting, and it is not surprising that he lost his balance. Its attack and rush were overwhelming. Thus, it was a kind of exalted speculative wondering lying behind his inner joy that caused his mistakes. He had imagined, for instance, that the first sight of Greece would bring some climax of revelation, making clear to what particular type of early life the spirits of his companions conformed. More, that they would then betray themselves to one and all for what they were in some effort to escape, in some act of unrestraint, something, in a word, that would explain themselves to the world of passengers and focus them upon the doctor's microscope forever. Yet, when Greece showed a first fair rim of outline, his companions still slept peacefully in their bunks. The anticipated denouement did not appear. Nothing happened. It was not the mere sight of so much land lying upon the sea's cool cheek that could prove vital in an adventure of such a kind, for the adventure remained spiritual. O'Malley had merely confused two planes of consciousness. As usual, he saw the thing whole in that extraordinary way to which his imagination alone held the key, and hence his error. Yet the moment as ever remained for him one of vital, stirring splendor, significant as life or death. He remembers that he was early on deck, and saw the dawn blow up softly from behind the islands with a fresh salt wind that blew at the same time like music into his very heart. Golden clear it rose, and just below, like the petals of some vast archetypal flower that gave it birth, the low blue hills of coast and island opened magically into blossom. The rocky cliffs of Matapan slipped past. The smooth, bare slopes of the ancient shoreline followed. Treeless peaks and shoulders, abrupt precipices, summits and ridges, all exquisitely rosy and alive. He had seen Greece before, yet never thus and the emotion that invaded every corner of his larger consciousness lay infinitely deeper than any mere pseudo-classical thrill he had known in previous years. He saw it, felt it, knew it from within instead of as a spectator from without. This dawn mood of the earth was also his own, and upon his spirit, as upon her blue-crowned hills, lay the tide of high light with its delicate swift blush. He saw it with her, through one of her opened eyes. The hot hours the steamer lay in the Piraeus harbour were wearisome, the noise of loading and unloading cargo worse even than at Catania. While the tourist passengers hurried fussily ashore carrying guidebooks and cameras to chatter among the ruined temples, he walked the decks alone, dreaming his great dream, conscious that he spun through leagues of space with the great being who more and more possessed him. Beyond the shipping and the masts collected there from all the ports of the Mediterranean and the Levant, he watched the train puffing slowly to the station that lay in the shadow of Theseus' temple, but his eyes at the same time strained across the haze toward Eleusis Bay, and while his ears caught the tramping feet of the long torchlight procession, some power of his remoter consciousness divined the forms of hovering gods, expressions of his vast mother's personality with which, in worship, this ancient people had believed it possible to merge themselves. The significant truths that lay behind the higher mysteries, degraded sins because forgotten and misinterpreted, trooped powerfully down into his mind. For the supreme act for this profound cult, denied by a grosser age that seeks to telephone to heaven, deeming itself thereby advanced, lay in the union of the disciple with his God, the God he worshipped all his life, and into whose person he slipped finally at death by a kind of marriage rite. The gods ran again through his mind with passion and delight as the letter of his early studies returned upon him, accompanied now for the first time by the in-living spirit that interpreted them. The gods! Moods of a giant life, manifestations of a spreading consciousness pushed outwards, powers of life and truth and beauty. And meanwhile Dr. Stawell, sometimes from a distance, sometimes coming close, kept over him a kind of half-paternal, half-professional attendance, the Irishman accepting his ministrations without resentment, almost with indifference. "I shall be on deck between 2 and 3 in the morning to see the comet," the German observed to him casually toward the evening as they met on the bridge. "We may meet, perhaps." "All right, Doctor, it's more than possible," replied O'Malley, realizing how closely he was again watched. In his mind at the moment another sentence ran, the thought growing stronger and stronger within him as the day declined. "It'll come tonight, come as an inner catastrophe not unlike that of death. I shall hear the call to escape." As well as if it had been told to him in so many words that the sleep of his two companions all day was in the nature of a preparation. The fluid projections of themselves were all the time active elsewhere. Their bodies heavily slumbered, their spirits were out and alert, summoned forth by those strange and radiant evocative forces that even in the dullest minds grease stirs into life. They had temporarily escaped. Again he saw those shapes of cloud and wind moving with swift freedom over the long bare hills. Again and again the image returned. With the night a similar separation of the personality might come to himself too. Stawell's warning passed in letters of fire across his inner sight. With a relief that yet contained uneasiness, he watched his shambling figure disappear down the stairway. He was alone. The end of chapter 19.